I've introduced Proverbs, and I'll try not to be redundant, but one of the ways in which we've seen the thesis of the whole book of Proverbs is in chapter 1, verse 7. So it is helpful for us to remind ourselves that verse 7 of chapter 1 of Proverbs gives us kind of this is what all of Proverbs is seeking to do, that the fear of Yahweh, that is the covenant name of the God of Israel, your translation may have it rendered the Lord. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools, or the Legacy Standard translates this, ignorant fools despise wisdom and discipline. Your translation may say despise wisdom and instruction. And here we get in this introductory, we might even imagine it's like a runway, a ramp onto the highway of wisdom, that there are two people in the world according to Proverbs. And tonight, what I want to do is to talk about the two people in the world, at least according to the framework of the book of Proverbs. There is the one who is wise, and there is the one who is a fool. And so in Proverbs, we have a way of looking at every individual and all of life. That means everything that the individual is interacting with and responding in God's world, and it will indicate that person's relationship with God. If they are wise, then they have a right relationship with God, which fundamentally is determined by they fear him. If they are a fool, then it will be fundamentally manifest because they hate wisdom and instruction, because they do not fear him. Wisdom we could define as a virtue with serious consequences when we learn about wisdom from Proverbs. And we also could define wisdom as skill in living as God intends. So what is wisdom? Skill in living as God intends. Now, we're going to build this out into details, but we're going to kind of have the bigger framework first. And so we'll then work through, like, how then does wisdom relate to my words, speech? How does wisdom relate to money and possessions? How does wisdom? No, we'll work into the details, but we first are learning that wisdom is the skill of living as God intends. And fundamentally, at the core of wisdom is a submission to God. A submission to God. So if one does not fear God, if one does not submit to God, then one cannot and will not live wisely. Bruce Waltke writes, righteousness is a pattern of life, not merely specific acts. What is at stake is personhood. In personhood is not merely performances, disposition rather than deeds, character beyond conduct. Righteousness is a matter of the heart, acquired through the sage's words. So I think there's a really helpful distinction that Waltke writes in this general explanation of righteousness that would come through wise living, and that is, we are not talking about technique. When you think about fearing God and therefore gaining a heart of wisdom, we're not talking about technique. We're fundamentally talking about a relationship to God that is characterized by fear of him and love for him, that responds to his instruction and correction. So this is what we remember when we talk about the heart. Proverbs aims at our hearts. So in Proverbs, the intent of the proverb, and we even see it in the literary nature of the way Proverbs is written, its intent is to give an exposition of the wise man and of the fool. It is to expose those who read it in order to show them as well as point them to be one who either fears God or comes to know that they do not fear God and rather they are a fool. So there is this simultaneous sort of ongoing display through wisdom in the life of the one who fears God that he is wise, and at the same time the one who rejects correction and instruction, that is indicative of their opposition to God. So in Proverbs, we get the exposition of the fool and of the wise man, which is the display of their two distinct relationships with God. But how does this folly and this wisdom play out? It's played out in the arena of practical life, in personal relationships. The wise man, in his right relationship with God, is able to navigate relationships with others and the world in which he lives in a righteous and wise way, while the fool, who is opposed to God, will manifest his folly in the same theater of personal relationships and life on earth. And so this is what Proverbs will do for us. The lesson between the wise man and the fool will be descriptive. And we will see that the wise man is one who he does righteousness. And we will see the description of the fool is the one who does wickedness. Proverbs speaks in those two distinct terms. We'll see there's this one little category that we'll call the gullible, but you're either a fool who does wickedness or you are a wise man who does righteousness. That's the way Proverbs sees the world and describes people. And so ultimately, in this way that we will be able to describe and therefore discern the wise man from the fool, it is teaching us how to fear the Lord in all of life and how specifically we manifest that fear of God. And so we're going to look at these two types of people, the wise and the fool. Now, the third category, the gullible, we will talk about, but in one sense, you need to realize the gullible is moving in one direction or the other. Now, this requires everyone, so especially I want you kids to listen to this. You need to understand that as you're going to be going through life, all of your circumstances with life, and especially your relationships that you have with your father and your mother, with your siblings, as you get sort of further and further away from the house, your peers, your friends, how you respond to all of those circumstances and individuals, you will be displaying that either you are growing in your folly or you are growing in wisdom. All right, kids, you hear that? You are never in a neutral place. And that's why we are able to say that Proverbs clearly, as we see repeatedly, but you see in verse 8, it's written to sons. Hear, my son. We'll get into that. We'll get into the way that I'm going to call in Proverbs the dojo for wisdom. That was sort of cheesy, but I couldn't figure out. Like I thought about schoolhouse, I thought about greenhouse, but that's not the way Proverbs renders it. It renders it more like you really have a training that matters. You're either going to get beat up by folly, or you're actually going to really benefit from wisdom. So I'm calling it a dojo. The dojo for wisdom is the family. And so we're going to see, as we move further next week, we're going to see that therefore we need to understand, fathers and mothers, and therefore sons and daughters, that the way you're understanding how wisdom is going to come to you comes through the dojo of the home, of the family. But before we get there, we need to frame up the wise man and the fool with this little category of the gullible. Take a look at what Proverbs does aim to do. And in verse 4 of chapter 1, it does speak to this gullible one. In the first line of verse 4, it says, give prudence to the simple. See, that would be that sort of middle category. Not that they're neutral. They're just in a place where they're either going to move to wisdom or they're going to move to folly. They're simple. They're gullible. And so Proverbs is written to these people, to the youth, in order that they would get knowledge and discretion. So I do intend this class to especially target you younger people, because Proverbs has a special target for younger people. You will not become wise merely by getting old. In fact, you will become a greater fool as you get old if you do not fear God and get a heart of wisdom. So you kids, you need to hear that. Every aspect of your native constitution hates instruction and discipline. It requires you to do the things that you do not want to do. You do not want to pay attention, do you? You do not want to listen. You do not want to have to repeat something that has been told to you that is important for you to be able to remember and recall. You don't want to have to say no to your desires. You don't want to have to reject people who will in turn reject you. You don't want to do hard things, right? Every aspect of wisdom you need to understand. You've got nothing going for you when it comes to your natural moral constitution. Proverbs is written to you so that you will not be left to the ruin that would come to you, simple ones, but rather that you actually may become wise. And so this is who the gullible is written. It does address these individuals, and it's encouraging. It's encouraging. Look at verses 20 and 22 in chapter 1. Again, dealing with the gullible, the one who's going to go in one way or the other. And if it's not through instruction and fear of God, it will be to the way of the fool. Wisdom shouts in the streets. Now, kids, when you have something that's not a person, in this case, wisdom, and then the person who is riding, they give attributes to that thing that's not a person, that these attributes are actually attributes of a person. In this case, wisdom shouting in streets. Does wisdom have the ability to walk into the middle of the street? Some of you went to the parade, 4th of July. I saw Peter. I shouted at Peter in the streets. He didn't hear. Did wisdom walk down the streets in downtown New Bern? Can wisdom do that and shout to Peter, Peter? No, why not? Because wisdom's not a person, right? It doesn't have legs. It doesn't have lungs. This is called personification. Personification. It's a way to teach us, oh, this is what wisdom is doing. It is actually calling out to, and we'll see who it calls out to, wisdom is a woman. Wisdom is a woman in Proverbs. Really helps young men to maybe pay attention. Wisdom is a woman, and she is shouting in the street. She gives forth her voice in the square. At the head of the noisy street, she calls out at the entrance of the gates of the city. She utters her sayings. What does she say? Verse 22. Benji, what does wisdom say in the streets? Read verse 22 out loud.
Along the simple one, along the scoffers delight.
All right. This is this one little category called the gullible or the simple that Proverbs does sort of touch on very briefly. And wisdom is calling to her. Now, all of you young people, you need to understand this definitely is you. right? You're still by nature of your place in life, you're gullible and you're simple. And wisdom is calling for you. If you will listen to her, you're going to turn from what is called simplicity or being gullible. You're going to turn from scoffers who delight in scoffing and fools who hate knowledge. You will turn, and look at verse 23, turn to my reproof. Now, maybe some of you parents say, son, I reprove you for the way that you just spoke to your mother. However, we probably don't use that word today. It just means correction or rebuke. Behold, I will pour out my spirit on you, and I will make my words known to you, because I called and you refused. I stretched out my hand and no one paid attention, and you neglected my counsel, and you were not willing to accept my reproof. I will also laugh at your disaster. I will mock when your dread comes, and when your dread comes like a storm and your disaster comes like a whirlwind, when distress and anguish come upon you. Then they will call on me, but I will not answer. Then they will seek me earnestly, but they will not find me, because they hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of Yahweh. They were not willing to accept my counsel. They spurned all my reproof. So they shall eat the fruit of their way and be satisfied with their own devices. For the turning away of the simple, there's that term again, the gullible will kill them, and the complacency of fools will destroy them. But he who listens to me shall dwell securely and will be at ease from the dread of evil. So there's this brief introduction to the gullible, the simple in chapter 1. And clearly, we're able to see how you respond to wisdom's correction will determine if you become wise or if you continue to be a fool. So that's the introduction, but of the gullible. But we need to get into the main categories of the wise. Here's a summary description: the wise, those who are righteous, are those who trust and obey Yahweh. That's the key to wisdom. In Proverbs, those who are wise, they are those who do righteous, but they are those who trust and obey Yahweh. That ambiance over there in the corners for you, Aaron. I don't know if it's sort of making you at home like this is Florida or preparing you for Papua New Guinea, but just enjoy the frog that has somehow climbed into Peter's office. Um, the wise, they all of their life is based upon the sacred relationship that they have with the Lord. And so they possess an insight that is derived from God's perspective, which is altogether different from their own relative insight. That's the summary definition of the wise. Here's a place where probably some of you have memorized it, and you can repeat it on a daily basis to be able to give you this distinguishing feature of the wise. Proverbs chapter 3, and surprise, surprise, 5 through 8. Let's go there. Some of you have it memorized. This is a description of, in one sense, the way in which the wise man operates in the world. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own. What, Luke? Your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him. Who is the him? Well, it's the one that we just referred to in verse 5, Yahweh, the Lord. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear whom? Kinsey? L? Fear the Lord. Fear Yahweh. and turn away from evil. It will be healing to your body and refreshment to your bones. Right there is like you could have that, you can memorize that, gives you a little kernel into the way in which the wise person thinks, that the way that they operate in all of life is on the basis of their sacred relationship with the Lord. And by that relationship with Yahweh, they possess a wisdom and insight into life that is derived from God's perspective, which is altogether different from their own. So let's get into some particular attributes of the wise. Now, I'm going to cherry pick, right? I'm picking certain verses that enable us to give a whole description of the wise. So we're going to be jumping around all over Proverbs just to see how this is taught. Go to Proverbs 26, verse 5. We will see verse 11, verse 12, verse 16. The wise man is teachable. This is the, in one sense, you could say this is the beginning, essential attribute of the wise man. He is teachable. And I say he, Proverbs is aimed at men, but what is taught here is not unique for only men. So it could be girl, could be woman, but those who are wise are teachable. I would like, Scott, could you read verse 5, and then Teresa, you're going to read verse 11 and verse 12. Now, some ways you can teach. How can you teach? You can have positive, and you can also teach by negative, right? So if I tell you this is the opposite of the wise man, and I describe the opposite, then you're able to know the wise man is not like that. That is not a description of the wise man, all right? So we have positive and negative ways that we are able to teach. And so here's one of the ways that we see that he is teachable. He actually is truly humble. He is not wise in his own opinion. So let's have verse 5.
Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes.
All right, this is that challenging verse 4 and verse 5 seem to say like contradictory things. In verse 4, we would be commanded, you don't answer a fool according to his folly, lest you yourself be like him. Verse 5 says, answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes. So what are fools in their own eyes? They're wise. Fools have a high estimation of themselves and of their wisdom, of their understanding. Fools are not teachable. The opposite of that is what is commanded in verse 5. The wise don't answer fools according to their folly, because they're the opposite of the fool. They do not have a high estimation of their own opinion. Let's jump to verse 11. Who did I have? Teresa.
Like a dog that returns to its vomit.
Okay. What's this being described there? What's the problem with the fool that makes him like a dog? He continues. He actually has a high estimation, and we're using some graphic language here. He likes vomit. He actually has a high opinion of it. The way in which he sees things and makes decisions and navigates life, i.e., vomit, like he keeps going back to it. The wise man is not like that. He doesn't return to foolishness that he may have. We jump down to verse 12. What does it say about the wise man and the fool in verse 12? Who has verse 12? Did I assign that one? Teresa had that. Scott, you read verse 12.
Sharing a pair of glasses. Do you see a man wise in his own eyes? there is more hope for a fool than for him.
So again, we have a negative description of the fool as one who is wise in his own eyes, and therefore you do not have hope for him. In contrast with the wise man does not have a high estimation of his own opinion. Verse 16, the sluggard is wiser in his own eyes than 7 men who can respond with a discreet answer. Have you ever talked to a lazy person and you ask them some version of the question, like, why didn't you do the work? Like they always have an answer because they're wise in their own eyes. And so what marks a wise man is that he is teachable, and to be teachable means that you truly are humble when it comes to regard of your own opinion. You have a low estimation of your own opinion. Now, this doesn't sell, does it? Like there's no sort of native person who naturally receives this kind of instruction. This is universally offensive to all of us, right? Just anytime someone corrects you, what immediately happens? Your internal prod hairs bristle. It doesn't matter. It could come from your husband. It could come from your wife. It could come from your father. It could come from your mother. It could come from your siblings. It could come from your boss. And it's just sort of instantaneously, why do they think they get to critique either what I've done or what I've understood? Right? The wise man does not have that disposition towards himself. He's teachable. He's not wise in his own eyes. Let's go to chapter 18, verse 15. We'll see he actually seeks knowledge. Now, what did we learn? Where does knowledge begin? Fear of the Lord. Proverbs 18, verse 15. Malia, can you read that?
An intelligent heart acquires knowledge.
So what does the wise man want? He wants knowledge that comes from God. Therefore, what is he listening for? What is his ear sort of tuned to hear? I want knowledge that comes from knowing God. So the wise, he is teachable, and therefore he is receptive to knowledge and seeks it. Turn to chapter 10, verse 14. Chapter 10, verse 14. It says something else about the wise man in relationship to knowledge that shows us what it means to be teachable. Chapter 10, verse 14. Quinn, are you there? Can you read that?
Wise men store up knowledge. Now from foolish, ruin is at hand.
When you store something up, some of you have stored up munitions. I have no idea what y'all are preparing for. Why do you store up munitions? Now, let me just ask, for those of you who store up munitions, are you indifferent to guns and ammo? Or does your heart actually get happy when you go and you look at your armories that you have in your houses? You get pretty excited, don't you? You store up munitions and weapons because you really like them. And I hope you don't ever have to use them for whatever reason you have so many of them. But what does the wise man do with what he stores up, what he would treasure, what he really likes? What does he do? What does he store up? Knowledge. And where do you get it from? You get it from the Lord, the fear of the Lord. What that illustrates is he is teachable. He has a disposition to God and God's means of correction and instruction that he is eager and desirous for the Lord to teach him. Therefore, let's turn to 13, chapter 13, verse 1. How does he respond? How does he respond to instruction and counsel? Daniel, can you read verse 1?
My son hears his father's instruction, but a scoffer does not listen to me.
So how does the wise, how do they respond to instruction, to counsel? They accept it. And this is in contrast with, what does the scoffer do? They don't listen to correction. Now, how do you tell if someone hears and someone else doesn't hear? Do they get a hearing test? Is that what you need? We need an audiologist to be able to determine the wise and the fool. Does the incredibly complicated mechanisms of the inner ear work for this one? Is that how we determine if you are wise or a fool? How do we determine if you heard or if you did not hear? What do you do? What do you do? So when mama or daddy says, "Did you hear me?" They're not asking if your hearing works. What are they asking? Yeah. Did you do what you were told? Did you make the correction that was given to you? The wise man listens to instruction and counsel. Jump back to chapter 12. We see it again in verse 5. The thoughts of the righteous are just, but the guidance of the wicked is deceitful. You see, it's not a question if people are doing something. The wise and the fool, they're both doing something. But what they're doing really is able to display how are they responding to God. And how they respond to God is shown or manifest in their life by how are they responding to the instruments who bring God's wisdom. And again, next week we'll see that training environment in Proverbs is especially the family. So kids, how you are responding right now to God's word, truth that God has revealed, that is coming to you from the Bible, but through the church, through teaching in the church, but especially as it's coming to you through your parents. How you are responding right now illustrates, do you have these attributes of being teachable? The wise are teachable. If you're not teachable, what are you? You're a fool. Now, people don't like that, do they? Like, how about you just say, "I'm not wise"? Proverbs doesn't do that. Proverbs even says that you're like a dog who keeps returning to its vomit. Now, here's another. I'll just quickly hit Proverbs 10, verse 8, also describes this teachability as submissive. The wise of heart will receive commandments, but an ignorant fool of loose lips will be ruined. I do think that we are able to see, even among, we'll say, young men, and you can be a young man and be 35. You can act like a young man and be 45. You're not really young, but you're just acting like it. Right? Young men in particular need to understand that submission is a display of the wise man. And therefore, there is a submissiveness to receive commandments, counsel, instruction. All of that is the way in which Proverbs, and I just cherry picked, shows that the wise man, the wise woman is teachable. Here's the second attribute, the company that they keep. Proverbs enables us to understand the wise man by who do they associate with. Or, you guys, I don't know what you say today, but who you hang out with. Now, we need to make sure you understand that no longer is hanging out with people going to be the way it was in the day of Solomon. Right? You can hang out with people when you're not actually with people. It's weird, but that's what the internet does. Whoever you are associating with, whether it be Facebook or social media or who you are listening to, like those, you are associating with those people. You are wanting their information, their perspective, their ideas, their values. You're wanting those values, information, ideas to be yours. You share them with them. That is why you are giving yourself to these kinds of influences. But it surely does also relate to the literal human beings, flesh and blood, that you choose to keep company with. Now, kids, just so you know, did you get to choose your family? No, God did. And He's all wise. So thank Him, and you need to go to your siblings, even tonight, and say, you know what? I love you because God gave you to me. But your company, your friends, the people you associate with by free choice, they will display, are you a wise man or a fool? Let's go again. Proverbs, we're going to go to chapter 2. Chapter 2. We're going to see, starting in verse 1, my son, if you will receive my words and treasure my commandments within you, to make your ear pay attention to wisdom, incline your heart to discernment. For if you call for understanding, give your voice for discernment. If you seek her as silver and search for her hidden treasure. I'm sorry, this is showing where do you get instruction? It comes from the company of the wise. So who is giving this wisdom in the beginning of Proverbs chapter 2? It's the Father. The Father. So here's the first thing. The wise keep wise company. Examples of who the wise are in Proverbs, especially, is accented by the father in his teaching to his son in chapter 3. My son, do not forget my law, but let your heart guard my commandments. For length of days and years of life and peace they will add to you. Do not let loving kindness and truth forsake you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart, so you will find favor and good insight in the eyes of God and man. Who is the wise man in this in these 4 verses? The Father. Now, if you just thinking about this, Aaron, and I don't know how it works in Papua New Guinea, but Aaron's going to go to a totally different place. And one of the things that you see, like when you move to totally different cultures, is you're able to see, like, oh, they value this in a way that my culture does not value. It happens when you also marry, by the way. All right. That families, like, oh, they value this more than the way I was raised to value this. And there are some societies, some cultures, maybe we even say some families, they really desire to listen to their fathers. And then there's others who they really don't like to listen to their fathers. Now you're able to see, look at, we go back to chapter 1, verse 8, the second line, and do not abandon your mother's instruction. So Proverbs, we got a whole Proverb 31, it actually came from a mother. So one of the things that we're able to see in the framework of Proverbs is the wise man, he associates himself with the wise, and that especially begins with their father and their mother. So not all of you are in this category, but at least 5, 7 of you are. If you want to be wise, you're going to start right now. And the way you will start is that you will actually want to keep the company of your father and mother, not because they're cool, not because they're funny, but because they're wise. So you'll want to learn wisdom from them. Now, we also are able to learn about the wise keeping wise company is turn to chapter 13. The company of those they choose to associate with in life. Chapter 13, verse 20 is wise people, they choose to be among the practitioners of the way of wisdom. He who walks with the wise will be wise, but the friend of fools will suffer harm. So if you are wise, you are actively seeking out to be among the company of those who are practitioners of wisdom. This is easy to illustrate. If you're in our church, one of the people that you should be seeking out company with is Peter Frederick. Scott Barrio is another one, right? Now, gals, you're not really going to hang out with Peter and Scott, so you're going to choose women, Teresa and Beth. Why? It's because they're practitioners of the way of wisdom. Now, if that's not the company you choose to keep, but rather you choose to keep the opposite company of the wise, and we are able to see that Proverbs, again, it only thinks in terms of this sort of dualistic division of everyone into either being wise or being foolish, that we're able to see in verse 20 that the friend of fools suffers harm. If you purposefully are associating yourself with foolish people, then you will suffer. You will suffer because you choose to associate with fools. Go ahead and ask older saints, and often they can illustrate from their pre-Christian lives of how they suffered harm from associating with fools. Now, thus, one of the things that Proverbs describes wisdom, and therefore the wise, they're able to discern who then should be a true friend. Who's the kind of person that you would want to invest the limited time that you have to keep associations with them. Go to Proverbs 17:7. Now, I am aiming for you younger people. For those of you who are parents and you are in the throes of making and raising babies, you don't have much time to be hanging out with folks. But for you younger people, it especially becomes true in your teenage years and then you're sort of before you may marry and have the responsibilities that come with marriage. But when you have that kind of discretionary time, you need to be able to understand how to identify a true friend. 17:17 says a friend loves at all times and a brother is born for adversity. In one sense, you can be able to determine who's really a friend by you look around who was with you in hard times. Who was with you in hard times. Now I'm going to just beat a little drum, and I'm old, so it's not necessary. It's going to sound condescending because I don't really, I didn't grow up with the internet, and that was a blessing. And some of you have, and so the way it worked for you is totally different. You need to realize that the way in which you can engage with people who do not know you, and they may have in their minds a care about you as an idea, but they do not care for you because you are not a person that they can know and care for. And if you make these kinds of allegiances in your own heart to these people who are influences through YouTube or whatever ways in which they work, you need to understand that you don't understand the nature of the flesh and blood way that God has designed us to work as human beings. And so you need to choose the people who can be loyal to you as good friends by being with you in the hard times. That YouTube influencer is not with you in the hard times. Proverbs 18, verse 24. A man of too many friends comes to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. John MacArthur gave a series of lectures about leadership characteristics when I was in seminary. And I remember being struck by the first quality that he chose to address when he talked about leaders that he wanted to serve with. And that first characteristic trait was loyalty. Loyalty. Proverbs 18:24 describes there can be people who have many friends, but all of those friends, they are not loyal. And therefore, they really aren't friends. A friend who sticks closer than a brother, that is a friend who will support you with truth and not your popularity because they are loyal. Proverbs 27:6, and for the sake of time, I might have to just give you some of these references. Proverbs 27:6. This is what a good friend is like. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but deceitful are the kisses of an enemy. We got some good friends here. And I'm just choosing Peter and Scott and Teresa because they're trained at being good friends. Tim likes to call that biblical counseling. I just think it sounds to me like it's just you're trying to be a good friend and you share truth. But I've heard from them and experienced a little bit myself. People don't like good friends because they're going to tell you the truth. And the truth in some situations, namely when you're sinning, is not what you want to hear. But that actually is the sign of a good friend. A wise man knows how to select. He has the discernment to be able to identify this is a good friend. All right. Now, Proverbs 27:9 needs to be joined with Proverbs 27:6 because this one is indeed a good friend also knows how to make your heart glad. All right. So there's happiness in biblical counseling. There's great encouragement and affection that comes from good friends when they counsel you with the truth. Proverbs 27:9, oil and incense make the heart glad. So counsel from the soul is sweet to his friend. Proverbs 27:10 then says that do not forsake your friend or your father's friend, and do not come to your brother's house in the day of your disaster. Better is one who dwells near than a brother far away. See, a good friend prioritizes his present friends in times of need. Right? So this is evidence of the way in which a wise man surrounds himself with wise company. Next week, we'll talk about the fool. Next week, we'll talk about the fool. I want to encourage you, and I really I'm at least old enough to be able to say you see this more and more and more the longer God allows you to live. You do not have to be that smart to be wise. If you will fear God and you will seek to hear his instruction and correction, you will gain a heart of wisdom. And you won't know half the things that the supposedly really, really intelligent, super smart people know. And yet they will be fools and you will walk wisely. And in one sense, the thing that is, it's a paradox to me is how are there so incredibly intelligent people they are so impressive to me in the areas that God has given them massive powers of intellect, and yet they are fools. Well, it's because they don't fear God. So you can be wise. You can be wise. You do not need to think that there is a limitation in one sense that God has placed to you because of what you might find to be difficult when it comes to reading or thinking or knowing things. If you will fear God and you will receive his instruction, you will grow in wisdom. So be encouraged wherever you are, if you are the simple, or even if you are presently a fool, if you will receive God's instruction by fearing him, you will become wise. And you look back 10 years from walking in the fear of the Lord, and you will think, I can't believe some of the things God has taught me. An absolute cinder block like me, God has given some discernment to. How great is God? And then you'll be able to think back like, I was such a fool. That's God's grace working in our hearts as we fear him and receive his correction and instruction. Next week, we'll describe what will your life be like if you don't. So come back to know what you do not want to be, a fool. Any questions? All right.